I'm sure you guys have seen on the news that the submersible Titan that was on its way down to the Titanic wreck site had imploded, possibly even before it even got to the Titanic. It's been absolutely devastating. Now, I have a lot to say about it because there's been some things that I've seen that I think are absolutely awful. So many things that have come out since this whole thing happened that is just, it's so upsetting. You're going down to see Titanic, that the reason why this accident happened was because the captain said, let's go full speed into this sea where there's literally icebergs everywhere so that we can make headlines, risk the lives of these people while we're doing it. It's just baffling to me that that is why the Titanic is down 13,000 feet in the ocean. But these people went down in this submersible after having countless warnings that this was so dangerous, and they didn't care, and they did it anyways.
And, you know, I've broken some rules to make this. I think I've broken them with logic and good engineering behind me. The carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did.
There's also been some new information that has come out that literally broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. I have been obsessed with the Titanic. I have some Titanic artifacts. I also have replicas, and I've been to the museums multiple times. I've also done videos on the Titanic. I feel like this is just like an experience that mind blown that I get to have. I've done TikToks on the Titanic.
Did you know that there were 2 other ships closely related to the Titanic that also sunk?
I had known this was going on prior to this happening. I remember when they announced that they were going to be taking people down to the Titanic wreck site, and I vocalized out of my mouth at the time that they said they were going to do this to my husband, oh, I would totally do that.
It's an incredible view. More people are getting a chance to see up close. This summer, a local team ventured into the depths of the ocean to begin what will be a years-long process to document the wreckage of Titanic in greater detail than ever before.
I would have unfortunately blindly trusted that the people that created this submersible knew what they were doing. For me, if I was in that situation, I'd be like, they know what they're doing. They've sent this down there numerous times. Like James Cameron went down to the Titanic 33 times, okay? Like he said he's calculated that he has been to the Titanic more than Captain John Smith, okay? He has spent more time on it than the captain did.
I've made 33 dives. I actually calculated that I've spent more time on the ship than the captain did back in the day.
If you've known all of that prior to what happened to these people, you would probably, if you're somebody like me, sign the waiver and be like, yes, I want to go see this wreck site. So I knew prior to this happening that there were people that were going to get to go down and see the Titanic. So when I heard that they were missing, I've been obsessed with keeping up to date with this and hoping that they were alive, okay? I'm gonna walk you guys through everything that's happened from the very beginning until now, and we're gonna talk about it. The submersible that they used to take down to see the Titanic is named Titan, and it's owned by Ocean Gate Expeditions.
Hi, my name is Stockton Rush. I'm the CEO and founder of Ocean Gate. Let's take a look at Titan.
Ocean Gate Inc. was founded in 2009 by Stockton Rush, who was one of the people that was missing and unfortunately died. It's a privately held company that operates out of Everett, Washington, and it provides submersibles for tourism, industry research, and exploration. Now, they had announced that they would be taking paying customers to visit the site of the Titanic wreck for $250,000 a person. Now, although this is a lot of money to the average person, it's made the wreckage site accessible to some who were able and willing to pay this amount. To anyone who has an obsession with Titanic or just an interest in going into the deep sea, this obviously had an appeal. I saw this person on TikTok who basically said that it would be like the average person going to Starbucks to get a coffee for these people to spend $250,000 to go see the Titanic wreck site. So it's basically like pocket change to them. Now let's talk about what the Titan was made out of. It was made out of carbon fiber and titanium. It was 22 feet long and weighed 23,000 pounds. It had one porthole where people could view the Titanic from.
I'd like to be remembered as an innovator. I think it was General MacArthur said, you're remembered for the rules you break. And, you know, I've broken some rules to make this. I think I've broken them with logic and good engineering behind me. The carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did. It's picking the rules that you break that are the ones that will add value to others and add value to society.
Between the 2 components, really what's holding them together and allowing them to move together is
The glue. The glue's very thick, so it's not like Elmer's glue. It's like peanut butter. It's pretty simple, but if we mess it up, there's not a lot of recovery.
Now, people were horrified and shocked, and all the memes and stuff were popping up, which, to be honest, were irritating me, because at the time we thought that these people were possibly still alive, slowly suffocating to death in the submersible. Internet was like, what in the world, when they found out that this submersible was controlled by a Logitech gaming controller that you can buy on Amazon. At the time it was $29. I did notice that once this happened, they ended up changing the price to $49, which is disgusting. They're trying to profit off of the deaths of these people looking at these controllers because of what happened to them.
We run the whole thing with this game controller.
So this Logitech controller you could at the time buy for $29, and it had 4-star reviews. So when you click on it and you read what the negative reviews are, it's all people talking about connectivity issues, okay? So people were thinking at the time maybe possibly there was something that went wrong with the controller. And so people were just like, are you kidding me? Like, you got into this tiny little submersible that's the size of a minivan on the inside, shoulder to shoulder with 5 dudes, and then you're controlling it with a gaming controller. And also, I have seen where people thought that, why are you going down in the submersible to look at the Titanic through a screen? Like, what's the purpose of that? There was a porthole. There was a window in the front of the submersible where they would be able to see the Titanic.
It says that it's unclear how many journeys that the Titan had successfully made to the Titanic wreck, but it is thought to have carried passengers on at least 10 trips before the tragedy struck. Now, this submersible on the inside is the size of a minivan. It has 1 toilet, meaning all 5 passengers of the last mission to see the Titanic had to sit cross-legged on the floor, and they were all going to be side by side. There was no GPS on this submersible and no tracking device to help locate it if it were to go missing, which this one did. And although the Titan typically spends 10 to 11 hours each dive to the Titanic, the submersible had enough oxygen for 5 crew members for 96 hours.
There are so many informative videos on what it is like to go down that deep into the ocean and the pressure. Whales and stuff won't even go down there. I thought you'd go down to the Titanic and that you could just see a whale float by, but no, it's so deep that they won't even go there. And if you actually like double the feet they do go down to, they still wouldn't reach the Titanic. Like, that is some deep depths, okay? It seems like it's more dangerous to go down to see the Titanic than it is to go into space. I'm not confirming or denying that. I'm just saying it seems it is such a dangerous thing to do. Honestly, the fact that anybody has successfully done this is mind-blowing to me. And after this happened, how is anybody ever gonna go down there and not like imagine the possibility that they could be crushed? They got countless warnings that this was dangerous, and they chose to ignore it.
An experimental submersible vessel that has not been approved or certified by any regulatory body and could result in physical injury, disability, emotional trauma, or death. Where do I sign?
In March of 2018, leaders of the Manned Underwater Vehicles Committee of the Marine Technology Society sent a letter to OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush urging him to take caution. The letter obtained by the New York Times warned that the current experimental approach of the company could result in problems from minor to catastrophic. So in these messages, you can see Rob say, "You are wanting to use prototype unclassed technology in a very hostile place. As much as I appreciate entrepreneurship and innovation, you are potentially putting an entire industry at risk." Rush responded saying, "I have grown tired of industry players who try to use a safety argument to stop innovation and new entrants from entering their small existing market. Since Guillermo and I started OceanGate, we have heard the baseless cries of 'you are going to kill someone' way too often. I take this as a serious personal insult." Rob responded saying, "I think you are potentially placing yourself and your clients in a dangerous dynamic. Ironically, in your race to Titanic, you are mirroring that famous catch cry, 'She is unsinkable.' Having dived the Titanic and having stood in a coroner's court as a technical expert, it would be remiss of me not to bring this to your attention."
By the time we're done testing it, I believe it's pretty much invulnerable.
And that's pretty much what they said about the Titanic.
That's right.
Stockton Rush was also quoted saying that in the last 35 years, there hasn't been serious injury aboard a submersible, and there have been over 15 million people going underwater. Statistically, submersibles are the safest vehicle on the planet. In July of 2018, there was a lawsuit against a former employee. OceanGate sued former director of marine operations for the Titan project, David Lockridge, and his wife, Carol Reed Lockridge, in Washington state. Then David Lockridge filed a safety concern lawsuit. It was a counterclaim in the lawsuit alleging a series of safety concerns about the Titan submersible. Lockridge also strongly encouraged that OceanGate utilize a classification agency such as American Bureau of Shipping to inspect and certify the Titan. The suit states that OceanGate refused both requests and states it's unwilling to pay for a classification agency to inspect its experimental design.
OceanGate's deep-sea submersible, the Titan, has some unusual features. Its hull, the part where the passengers sit, is made from carbon fiber with titanium caps at each end. Carbon fiber is used in airplanes and yachts, but not for deep-sea vessels. Have been raised about its reliability under extreme pressures. The shape of the sub is also different. Most have spherical hulls, so there's the same pressure all the way around. But the Titan is tube-shaped, but it means the pressure isn't equally distributed. In 2018, safety issues were raised by an employee of OceanGate, David Lockridge, an experienced submersible pilot. He said the structural integrity of the Titan had not been properly tested. This could subject passengers to potential extreme danger in an experimental submersible.
Lockridge disagreed with OceanGate's position to dive the submersible without any non-destructive testing to prove its integrity and to subject passengers to potential extreme danger in an experimental submersible. And then in November of 2018, the case was dismissed. In May of 2021, explorer Josh Gates and Brian Weed went on a test dive. Now, during this, Josh Gates revealed that the Titan did not perform well during their dive. He said, "Ultimately, I walked away from a huge opportunity to film Titanic due to my safety concerns with the OceanGate platform." Brian Weed added that the experience left him with a lot of misgivings as there were several things about the sub that made him feel very uneasy. Bill was one of the first paying passengers to get on Titan, but he struggled with communication issues during one of their trips. They had to abort the mission 3/4 of the way down. Arthur Loybold called the voyage a suicide mission after traveling down the ocean floor with the team in 2021. He said that the first they tried wouldn't work, and the second attempted dive had to be abandoned. He said parts fell off and the mission went into the water 5 hours late due to electrical problems. In July of 2022, CBS correspondent David Pogue said that the submersible got lost on the seafloor for about 5 hours when he was on the OceanGate expedition. He was not on the Titan and had stayed on the ship in a control room, adding they could still send short text to the sub, but did not know where it was.
The Titan is the only 5-person sub in the world that can reach Titanic depths, 2.4 miles below the sea. It's also the only one with a toilet. Sort of. And yet, I couldn't help noticing how many pieces of this sub seemed improvised.
We can use these off-the-shelf components. I got these from Camper World. We run the whole thing with this game controller.
Come on!
Colin Taylor went to the submersible with his 22-year-old son and described the communication system as very difficult. He told NBC News, "There's a text-based communication system that's two-way. Very slow," he said. "I mean, when you're sending signals through that amount of water, it's very, very difficult." He added that the sonar, computers, and lights all stopped working, and then they went back to the surface immediately. The crews lost communication with the host ship each time, according to their summary of 2022, that they completed 7 dives to the wreck. YouTuber Alan Estrada had been on board the missing Titan sub when the batteries of the sub suddenly drained during the expedition, forcing it to end early. He shared chilling details of how Titan's energy source quickly drained a 40% power during a July 2022 mission.
A lot of people who aren't having empathy for the people that were on board, it's because they were like, you got so many warnings and you still went on this submersible and went down there. They were not being smart about it, and they just wanted to do what they wanted to do when they wanted to do it, and this is what happened. And it was at the cost of other people's lives, probably just blindly trusting that they knew what they were doing. Like when you read these emails between Stockton Rush and somebody who was warning him that this was dangerous back in 2018, it's just, you just see the mistakes that he's making years before he even got to this point, and you just want to like be like, no, go this way, not this way, and he's still like Captain John Smithing the situation down to everybody's doom on this submersible. It is absolutely shocking to me, and if somebody can explain this that knows about this stuff, feel free to get down in the comments and explain it, but it blows my mind that the second that they lost communication with the people that were down in the submersible, that they didn't report it then. They literally waited over 6 hours before they reported it. Like they waited until they were supposed to resurface. But I also heard there's no navigation system on this submersible, so they needed to communicate back from their sister ship back and forth between the two ships in order for them to go down and come up. So if they knew that there was no way to communicate to them where they were and where they were going, why would they wait until they were supposed to come back up before they reported them missing? The second you lose communication with the sister ship, right, and you don't really know where you are, why did they not report it in that moment? That was hours, okay? Now we do know now that they are saying that the submersible imploded probably before it even got to the Titanic. So if that's true, it wouldn't have mattered if they reported it, because the implosion had already happened and they would have already been dead. But they didn't know that. So the fact that they didn't report it for that long is just shocking to me. There were so many theories as to what happened to these people and to the submersible prior to what we learned. One of those was that it got caught in the Titanic, and the reason why is because this was a very real possibility. This has actually happened to somebody before. I didn't know this, okay? This is something that came out after this happened, and it sounds like the most horrifying experience ever, to literally get trapped under debris of the Titanic and just be sitting there for hours thinking that you're going to die.
About September 2000, I was invited to become the first correspondent to report from the Titanic. I had a deathly fear of water, but being a correspondent, you don't say no to an invitation like that, so I went. We left Halifax, Canada, went on station above the Titanic, then dove in there 2.5 miles down to the bottom of the Titanic. And as your viewers may or may not know, when the Titanic sank, it broke into two pieces. The bow section went straight down. The stern did a somersault. And so it exposed, when it landed on the bottom, it exposed the propeller. So when we toured the bow, there was no problem. There was a moment of silence we had just for the sake of the victims there. It was all very somber, very haunting. And then as we traversed the debris field over towards where the stern section had landed, the first thing that caught my eye was the giant propeller. And when I say giant, it's huge compared to our sub. Our sub was like a little mosquito compared to the blades of the propeller. But I remarked to myself how shiny it was, because it's got brass, and so it doesn't corrode the way the rest of the Titanic has. And as that happened, as I was just dazzled by this giant propeller, I noticed we were speeding up, and that seemed strange to me. I thought we should be slowing down. And we later found out that we got caught up in a very high-speed underwater current. Those do exist down there. We got slammed right into the blades of the propeller, became trapped behind the blades of the propeller. And not only did we feel the collision, but also huge pieces of the Titanic started falling down on us, and we knew we were in trouble. When you were down there, my first concern was panic. Would there be anybody, the pilot or my diving buddy, would they panic? Because we'd been told a story on board the ship before we dove of a man who was caught in a similar situation, and in his panic went to the escape hatch thinking he would go out that way. He wasn't thinking, obviously, and of course expedited his doom. The pressures down there, if the water, even through a little crack, comes through, it'll cut you like a razor blade. So I, being a scientist, started thinking, okay, I'm a professional problem solver. We're stuck 2.5 miles below the surface of the water. How do we get out? And it took me the better part of a half hour or more as our pilot tried to jog us out, and he wasn't succeeding. I finally really hit a brick wall and realized, no, this is the end of it. And this voice in my head actually said to me, and I'll never forget the words, "This is how it's going to end for you." And for me as a correspondent who'd been to the North Pole, the South Pole, I'd covered Persian Gulf War and other places where I was in harm's way, always managed to survive it. For me, that was a bitter pill to swallow. And I thought of my wife, I'd never see her again. So I don't like recalling that experience. I was fortunate enough by the grace of God and by the skill of our pilot, who was a former MiG pilot. This was a Russian sub. He was able to finally extricate us after the better part of an hour. But then even when we got out, it was a question of getting to the surface, and you corkscrew the surface. It takes about 2.5 hours more. So it's an experience that I'll never forget in my life. And my heart goes out to these people who are lost. I'm just so sick to my stomach to think of those poor people down there. You know what it's like.
That is the most traumatizing thing that I could ever think about. You're in this claustrophobic environment, 13,000 feet in the ocean, and then you get caught under debris of the Titanic. And you're just sitting there thinking, I'm gonna die. Like, I cannot think of a worse way to die. Like, the ocean is so scary. It's so scary, but like being in a claustrophobic environment that you know is like running out of oxygen, you don't have food, you don't have water, you're trapped, and it's like pitch black. Oh my God, that is scary. So prior to them knowing that the submersible had imploded, they had heard some bangs that were happening in 30-minute intervals, and they thought that this possibly could have been them, so they started searching the area where they were hearing these noises.
This is exactly how he would try to indicate that they were still alive and try to communicate with surface. He would do some banging. You would do it on a regular schedule so that it was distinguishable from the background noises that are in the ocean all the time. So it is encouraging that there did seem to be a pattern to it. And, you know, we're going to continue to hold out hope.
I was just sitting there imagining them banging this and every 30 minutes because they're trying to conserve their energy and they're lost somewhere and can't be found and slowly suffocating. Now they're saying that could have been where the noise could have been coming from something above the surface that they were capturing. What they theorize happened was that they were on the way down to the Titanic. They lost communication about an hour and 45 minutes from the surface from when they left and started going down to the Titanic. They were supposed to make it to the Titanic in about 2.5 hours. They lost communication prior to that, so they believe that the submersible actually imploded before it ever even got there. And now, apparently when an implosion happens, it happens so fast that they would have had no idea what even happened to them. Their brains wouldn't have been able to process that something was wrong before they were just gone.
I'm avoiding work, so I'm going to answer this too quickly. Okay, so when we're talking about implosion in this context, we're talking about an equalization in pressure. So the pressure on the inside of the craft really wants to be the same as the outside of the craft. What's stopping it are those thick walls. So if there were to be a leak or a flaw in the walls, the pressure would equalize quickly. And the pressure inside would become like a negative pressure or a vacuum. So it's like simultaneously there's that immense pressure from the outside, but a vacuum effect from the inside. So it doesn't implode on like an atomic level where it doesn't exist anymore. It would just be crushed.
I can't like it's really hard for me to process that somebody is just a living, breathing human being and then like that, they're no more. They're just gone. I can't wrap my brain around that. It's so sad. And I heard that there were wives of some of the people on board that were up there just waiting for them to be found, like hoping that their husbands were going to be alive. And it reminds me of like what happened to the Titanic right there. There were women and children on lifeboats. I'm getting chills thinking about it. That were just sitting there hoping that their husbands were alive, that they were on another lifeboat, or that they were going to be saved. These women were sitting on this ship hoping that their husbands were going to be found and that they were going to come up out of the situation, and they didn't. And it's like James Cameron said, like the Titanic took so many lives and it just took 5 more. It's so devastating. It breaks my heart. It's so sad. It could have been avoided. There were so many mistakes that were made and ignored. That is a reason why this happened. And it was so avoidable, but they didn't avoid it. They made bad decisions, and you know, you can't get too hasty and too pushy with something like 13,000 feet deep into the ocean. Like, that is so dangerous. I think that one of the most heartbreaking things, as if the whole thing isn't heartbreaking enough, but one of the most heartbreaking things is that the 19-year-old boy that was on this, his aunt came out and said that he didn't want to go and that he was terrified. And he did it for his dad's Father's Day. I don't know if now let's not assume that his dad was pressuring him to do it. Let's not assume that, because we don't know. And they're gone, like they died. So we don't want to assume something about the situation, but what we do know is that he did go on there for his dad, and he died for it. He was going to school for business, and you know, 19 is so young. Like, I don't know. This whole thing is so sad. It breaks my heart. And to see that it played out this way, I don't even know. I'm absolutely devastated about this. If there's any updates, I will definitely be covering them when I get a chance to. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, because that will let me know you guys want updates from me. And if you have any extra information that I didn't include, feel free to leave it down below. However, links get sent to spam, so don't leave links. But if you want to share some information down below that you may know, if you're like someone who's a diver, or if you have done things like this, if you have extra information, definitely leave it down below. I'm sure people would love to read it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will be seeing you guys soon for another one.